On this night, Jesus gathered with his disciples, hosting for them one last meal, washing their feet and giving them final instructions. As a child, I knew of only one church which did actual foot washings. It was a small, primitive Baptist church in the woods across from our farm, and I remember the adults talking about the church's regular practice of foot washing. They did it as often as we took communion. When I was finally old enough to ride my bike across the road, the first thing I did was go to this church to explore, to look in the windows, to see exactly where they washed each other's feet. But when I got there, I became more enamored with the cemetery around the church and the functional outhouse in the woods because they didn't have indoor plumbing. I'd always found this cemetery a little bit spooky, but the neighbors at the farm beside ours, they hid Easter eggs there on Easter Sunday. The men would load up in trucks and go up early in the morning and hide all of the Easter eggs. Later in the day, they would get the women and the children in their trucks and make a caravan headed back toward the cemetery with air horns blowing so that everyone knew that they were on their way. My family would just be finishing Easter lunch, and we would go outside to watch them before our own egg hunt ensued. Today, that cemetery is where my dear loved ones are buried. People that I have lost in just the last few years. That place is no longer the foot washing, outhouse, egg hunt spot. In fact, it's taken on a sacred significance for me. It's where I too will be buried. Because the death dates of these loved ones are all this month, I've been thinking a lot about our last moments together. Like Jesus, some of them knew that they were about to die. So those last moments were poignant. And some of those last were totally unknown. And as I think back on these last moments, I can't help but wonder what I could have done differently. What I should have said differently. And my mind struggles to remember each detail of what they said and what they did. I suspect this is what the disciples did when it came time to record their memories of this last night. Jesus had told them, look, I'm about to die. I'm headed to my death. Theoretically, they knew the future was uncertain. When I read this gospel passage, I can feel their grief in the room. And it's like they knew that they were at this moment when everything was about to change. Today, we would call this anticipatory grief. It's what we feel when we know that the future is uncertain. In the days and years after a death, after a change in life circumstances, things seem much clearer. We know exactly what we would have done differently. It's easier to pinpoint what really mattered after the fact than it is in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. After the fact, what stood out for the disciples were 3 distinct moments on this night. It all started when he washed their feet. As host of the meal, Jesus had the power in the room to ask someone else to do the dirty but necessary task. In washing their feet, he reminded them again, I'm not here to dominate people. I'm here to walk along beside you, to serve. After this, they shared a meal together. It's lost on us in our culture, but eating bread and drinking wine together was an act of committing to be in relationship with each other, to be reconciled over differences with each other. And Jesus told them, this is exactly what I want you to do when I'm no longer with you. Eat and drink together. Be connected. Be reconciled. Be committed to each other. When you do this, I will be present, he promises them. The last, he gives them one commandment, a departing commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. On this night, which establishes the essential practices of our faith and our liturgy, I think the church often thinks of this commandment as an aside. For the church, just like us personally, has at times gotten so caught up in being right and wanting power over, control over. What we forget is that this commandment is just a summation of what Jesus just showed them. For in washing feet and sharing a meal, Jesus was showing them how to love. In truth, we want love to be power over another, control over another. And yet love, Jesus shows us, is in serving and sharing power with each other. It's a much harder way to live, which is why we need to be constantly reconciling with each other, eating and drinking and being connected to each other. And yet we're living through a moment which keeps us apart. A moment in time full of uncertainty over our future, but perhaps a moment in which what really matters is becoming clearer. Amen.